Esther chapter 1 The Dream of the Mordecai. In the second year of the reign of the Ahasuerus the Great, on the first day of the Nisan, Mordecai, son of the Jair, son of the Shimei, son of Kish, of the tribe of Benjamin, had a dream. He was a Jew residing in the city of the Susa, a prominent man who served at the king's court. And one of the captives whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Babylon, had taken from Jerusalem with Jeconiah, king of Judah. This was his dream. There was noise and tumult, thunder and earthquake, confusion upon the earth. Two great dragons advanced, both poised for combat. They uttered a mighty cry. And at their cry, every nation prepared for war to fight against the nation of the just. It was a dark and gloomy day. Tribulation and distress, evil and great confusion lay upon the earth. The whole nation of the just was shaken with fear at the evil to come upon them, and they expected to perish. Then they cried out to God, and from their crying there arose, as though from a tiny spring, a mighty river of flood of the world. The light of the sun broke forth, the lowly were exalted, and they devoured the boastful. Having seen this dream and what God intended to do, Mordecai awoke. He kept it in mind and tried in every way until night to understand its meaning. Mordecai threw out an assassination. Mordecai lodged in the courtyard with Bigtan and Teresh, two eunuchs of the king who guarded the courtyard. He overheard them plotting, investigated their plans, and discovered that they were preparing to assassinate King Ahasuerus. So he informed the king about them. The king had two eunuchs questioned, and upon their confession put to death. Then the king had these things recorded Mordecai to put them into writings. The king also appointed Mordecai to serve at the court and rewarded him for his action. Haman, however, son of the Hammedatha of Bozin, who was held in high honor by the king, sought to harm Mordecai and his people because of the two eunuchs of the kings, the banquet of the Ahasuerus. During the reign of the Ahasuerus, the same Ahasuerus who ruled over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia, while he was occupying the royal throne in the royal precincts of Susa. In the third year of his reign, he gave a feast for all officials and ministers, the Persian and the Median army officials, the nobles, and the governor of the provinces. For as many as 180 days, he displayed the glorious riches of his kingdom and the resplendent wealth of his royal estate. At the end of this time, the king gave a feast of 7 days in the garden court of the royal palace for all the people, great and small, who were in the royal precincts of Susa. There were white curtain draperies and violet hangings held by the cord of the fine crimson linen from the silver on marble pillars. Gold and silver couches were on a mosaic pavement, which was of the porphyries, marble, mother of the pearl, and colored stones. Drinks were served in a variety of the golden cups, and the royal wine flowed freely as befitted the king's liberalities. By ordinance of the king, the drinking was unstinted, for he had instructed all the stewards of his household to comply with the good price of everyone's. Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the royal palace of the king Ahasuerus. Refusal of the Vashti. On the 17 days when the king was merry with wine, he instructed Mehuman, Biztha, Habuna, Bigtha, Abagtha, Jutta, and Carchas, the 7 eunuchs who attended King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti into his presence wearing the royal crown, that he might display her beauty to the populace and the official, for she was lovely to behold. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the royal order issued through the eunuchs. At this the king was afraid, and he burned with fury. He conferred with the sages who understood the time, because the king's business was conducted in general consultation with the lawyers and the jurists. He summoned Kasserah, Sheltra, Admanta, Tashish, Meres, Massina, and Memucan, the 7 Persian and the Median officials who were in king's personal service and held first rank in the realms, and asked them what is to be done by law with King Vashti for disobeying the order of the king Ahasuerus issued through the eunuchs. In the presence of the king and of the officials, Memucan answered, "The Queen Vashti has not wronged the king alone, but all the officials and the populace throughout the province of the king Ahasuerus. For the king's conduct will become known to all of the women, and they will look with disdain upon the husband when it is reported." King Ahasuerus commanded that Queen Vashti be ushered into his presence, but she would not come. This very day the Persian and the Median noblewomen who hear of the king's conduct will recount it to all royal officials, and disdain and rancor will abound. If it please the king, let an irrevocable royal decree be issued by him and inscribed among the law of the Persian and the Medes, forbidding Vashti to come into the presence of the king Ahasuerus, and authorized the king to give her royal dignity to one more worthy than she. Thus, when the decree that the king will issue is published throughout his realms, vast as it is, all wives will honor their husband from the greatest to the least. This proposal pleased the king and the official, and the king acted on the advice of the Memucans. He sent a letter to all royal provinces, to each province its own script, and to each people its own language, to the effect that every man should be allowed in his own home. Esther chapter 2, Search for the new king. After this, when the king Ahasuerus' wrath had cooled, he thought over what Vashti had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's personal attendant suggested, let the beautiful young virgin be sought for the king. Let the king appoint emissaries in all the provinces of his realms to gather all the beautiful young virgins into the harem in the royal precinct of the Susa, under the care of the royal eunuch Higai, guardian of the woman. Let the cosmetics be given them. Then young woman who pleased the king shall reign in the place of the Vashti. This suggestion pleased the king, and he acted accordingly. There was in the royal precinct of the Susa a certain Jew named Mordecai, son of the Zeros, son of the Shimei, son of the Cushi, Benjaminite, who had been exiled from Jerusalem with the captives taken with Jeconiah, king of the Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Babylon, had deported. He became first the father to his cousin Hadassah, that is Esther. When she arose both her father and mother, the young woman was beautiful, formed, and lovely to behold. On the death of her father and mother, Mordecai adopted her as his own daughter. When the king ordered and the decree had been proclaimed, and many young women brought together to the royal precinct of the Susa under the care of the Higai. Esther also was brought in the royal palace under the care of the Higai, guardian of the woman. The young woman praised him and won his favor, so he promptly furnished her with cosmetic and provision, then choosing 7 maids for her from the royal palace. He transferred both her and her maid to the best place in the harems. Esther did not reveal her nationality or family, for Mordecai had commanded her not to do so. Day by day, Mordecai would walk about in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was faring and what was to become of hers. After the 12 months of preparation decreed for the woman, each one went in the turn to visit King Ahasuerus. During this period of the beautifying treatment, the 6 months was spent with the oil of the mirrors, and the other 6 months with the perfumes and the cosmetics. Then when each one was to visit the king, she was allowed to take with her from the harem to the royal palace whatever she chose. She would go in evening and return in the morning to a second harem under the care of the royal eunuch Shahzagas, guardian of the concubines. She could not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and had her summoned by name. As for Esther, daughter of the Abihail and adopted daughter of his nephew Mordecai, when her turn came to visit the king, she did not ask for anything but what the royal eunuch Higai, guardian of the woman, suggested. And she won the admiration of all who saw her. Ahasuerus chose Esther. Esther was led to the king Ahasuerus in his palace in the 10th month, Tebes in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all other women, and all of the virgins. She won his favor and goodwill. So he placed the royal crown on her head and made her queen in place of the Vashti. Then the king gave a great feast in honor of the Esther to all his officials and the servants, granting her the holiday to the provinces and bestowing gifts with royal generosity. Mordecai threw out on assassinations. As was said from the time the virgin had been brought together, and while Mordecai was passing his time at the king's gate, Esther has not revealed her family or nationality because Mordecai had told her not to. And Esther continued to follow Mordecai's instruction just as she had when she was being brought up by him. During the time that Mordecai spent at the king's gate, the Bigtan and the Teresh, 2 of the royal eunuchs who guarded the entrance, became angry and plotted to assassinate King Ahasuerus. When the plot became known to Mordecai, he told King Esther, who in turn informed the king in the Mordecai names. The matter was investigated and verified, and both of them was impaled on stakes. This was written in the annals in the king's presence. Esther chapter 3, Mordecai refused to honor Haman. After this event, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, son of the Hammedatha, the Agagite, the high ranker, setting him above all his fellow officials. All the king's servants who were at the royal gate would kneel and bow down to Haman, for that is what the king had ordered him in his regard. Mordecai, however, would not kneel and bow down. The king's servants who were at the royal gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's orders? When they had reminded him day after day, and he would not listen to them, they informed Haman to see whether Mordecai's explanation would prevail, since he had told them that he was a Jew. Haman reprisals. When Haman observed that Mordecai would not kneel and bow down to him, he was very angered. But he thought it was beneath him to attack only Mordecai, since they had told Haman of the Mordecai nationalities. He sought to destroy all the Jews, Mordecai peoples, throughout the lands of the king Ahasuerus. In the first month, Nisan, in the 12th year of the king Ahasuerus, the pur and orat was cast in Haman's presence to determine the day and the month for the destruction of the Mordecai people on a single day. And the lot fell on the 13th day of the 12th month Adar, decree against the Jews. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, dispersed among the nations throughout the province of your kingdoms, there is a certain people living apart. Their laws differ from those of every other people, and they do not obey the laws of the king. So it is not proper for the king to tolerate them. If it please the kings, let the decree be issued to destroy them, and I deliver to the procurators 10,000 silver talents for the deposits in the royal treasuries. The king took the signet ring from the hand and gave it to the Haman, son of the Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. The king said to Haman, the silver is yours as well as the people, to do with as you please. So the royal scribe was summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and they wrote at the dictation of the Haman an order to the royal satraps, the governor of every province, and the official of every people. To each province its own script, and to each people its own language. It was written in the name of the king Ahasuerus and sealed with the royal signet rings. Letters were sent by couriers to all the royal provinces to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, including women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, Adar, and to seize their goods as spoil. This is a copy of the letter the great king Ahasuerus wrote to the satrap of the 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia, and the governors subordinate to them as follows. Then I came to rule many people and to hold sway over the whole world, not being carried away by a sense of my own authority, but always acting fairly and with mildness. I determined to provide for my subject a life of lasting tranquility, and by making my kingdom civilized and safe for the travel to its farthest borders, to restore the peace desired by all people. Then I consulted my counselors as to how this might be accomplished. Haman, who excels among us in discretion, who is outstanding for constant goodwill and steadfast loyalty, and who has gained a place in the kingdom second only to me, brought it to our attention that mixed among all the nations throughout the world there is one people of ill will, which by its laws it opposed to every other people, and continually disregard the decree of the kings, so that the unity of the empire blamelessly designed by us cannot be established. Having noted therefore that this nation and it alone, it continually at variance with all people, lives by divergent and alien laws, is inimical to our government, and does all the harms it can do undermine the stability of the kingdom. We hereby decree that all those who are indicated to you in the letter of the Haman, who is in charge of the administration and is a second father to us, shall together with their wives and children be utterly destroyed by the sword of their enemies, without any pity and mercy on the 14th day of the 12th month other of the current years. So that when these people whose present ill will is of long standing have gone down into Hades by a violent death on the single day, they may leave our government completely stable and undisturbed for the future. A copy of the decree to the promulgated as a law in every province was published to all the peoples, that they might be prepared for that day. The couriers set out in haste at the king's command. Meanwhile, the decree was promulgated in royal precinct of the Susa. The king and Haman then sat down to the drink, but the city of the Susa was thrown into confusion. Esther chapter 4. Mordecai exhorted Esther. When Mordecai learned all that was happening, he tore his garment, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went through the city crying out loudly and bitterly, till he came before the royal gate, which no one clothed in sackcloth might enter. Likewise, in each of the provinces wherever the king's decree and the law reached, the Jews went into the deep mourning with fasting, weeping, and lament. Most of them lay on sackcloth and ashes. Esther maid and the eunuch came and told her, overwhelmed with anguish. The queen sent a garment for the Mordecai to put on, so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he refused. Esther then summoned the Hattakar, one of the king's eunuchs whom he had placed at the service, and commanded him to find out what this action of the Mordecai meant and the reason for it. So Hattak went out to the Mordecai in the public square in front of the royal gate, and Mordecai recounted all that had happened to him, as well as the exact amount of the silver Haman had promised to pay to the royal treasury for the slaughter of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the written decree for their destruction that had been promulgated in Susa. To show and explain to Esther, Hattak was to instruct her to go to the king and to plead and intercede with him on the behalf of her peoples. Hattak returned to the Esther and told her what Mordecai had said. Then Esther replied to the Hattak and gave him this message for Mordecai. All the servants of the king and the people of the province know that any man or woman who goes to the king in the inner court without being summoned is subject to the same law, death. Only if the king extends the golden scepter will such a person live. Now as for me, I have not been summoned to the king for 30 days. When Esther's words were reported to the Mordecai, he had this reply brought to her, do not imagine that you are safe in the king's palace, you alone of all the Jews. Even if you remain silent, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from the another sources. But you and your father's house will perish. We know, who knows, perhaps it was for a time like this that you became king. Esther sent back to the Mordecai the response. Go and assemble all the Jews who are in Susa, fast on my behalf, all of you, not eating or drinking night or day for 3 days. I and my maid will also fast in the same way. Thus prepared, I will go to the king contrary to the law. If I perish, I perish. Mordecai went away and did exactly as Esther had commanded. Prayer of the Mordecai. Recalling all that the Lord had done, Mordecai prayed to the Lord and said, Lord, King of the rule of all, everything is in your power, and there is no one to oppose you when it is your will to save Israel. You made heaven and earth and every wonderful things under heaven. You are Lord of all, and there is no one who can resist you, the Lord. You know all things, you know, Lord, that it was not out of insolence or arrogance or desire for glory that I act thus is not bowing down to the arrogant Haman. I would have gladly kissed the soul of his faith for the salvation of the Israel. But I act as I did so as not to praise the honor of the moral above that of God. I will not bow down to anyone but you. My Lord, it is not out of arrogance that I am acting thus. And now, Lord God, King, God of Abraham, spare your people, for our enemy regard us with a deadly envy and are bent upon destroying the inheritance that was yours from the beginning. Do not spurn your portion which you redeemed for yourself out of the land of the Egypt. Hear my prayer, have pity on your inheritance and turn our mourning into the feasting. Then we may live to sing praise to your name. Lord, do not silence the mouths of those who praise you. All Israel to cry out with all their strength, for death was staring them in the face. Prayer of the Esther. Queen Esther, seized with the moral anguish, fled to the Lord of the for refuge. Taking off her splendid garment, she put on garment of distress and mourning. In place of her precious ointment, she covered her head with dung and ashes. She afflicted her body severely, and in place of her festive adornment, her tangled hair covered her. Then she prayed to the Lord, the God of Israel, saying, My Lord, you alone are our King. Help me, whom am alone and have no help but you. For I am taking my life in my hand. From verse I've heard among my people that you, Lord, chose Israel from among all the nations, and our ancestors from among all their forebearers as a resting inheritance, and that you have fulfilled all your promise to them. But now we have sinned in your sight, and you have delivered us into the hands of our enemies. Because we worship their God, you are just our Lord. But now they are not satisfied with our bitter servitude, but have sworn on oath to their idols. Do away with the decree which you have pronounced to destroy your inheritance, to close the mouths of those who praise you, to extinguish the glory of your house and your altars, to open the mouths of the nation, to acclaim their worthless God, to extol a moral king forever. Lord, do not relinquish your scepter to those who are nothing. Do not let our foes gloat over our ruin, but turn their own counsel against them and make the example of the one who began this age against us. Be mindful of us, Lord. Make yourself known in the time of our distress and give me courage, King of God and the ruler of every power. In my mouth persuasive words in the presence of the lion, and turn it hard to the hatred for our enemies, so that he and his conspirators may perish. Save us by your power and help me, who am alone and have no one but you, Lord. You know all things. You know that I hate the pomp of the lawless and abhor the bed of the uncircumcised or of any foreigners. You know that I am under constraint, that I am abhor the sign of the grandeur that rests on my head when I appear in public. I abhor it like a polluted rag, and do not wear it in private. Your servant have never eaten at the table of the Haman, nor have I graced the banquet of the king, or drunk the wine of the libation. From the day I was brought here till now, your servant has had no joy except in you, Lord God of Abraham. O God, whose power is over all, hear the voice of those in despair. Save us from the power of the wicked, deliver me from my fears. Esther chapter 5. Now on the third day, Esther put on her royal garment and stood in the inner courtyard, looking toward the royal palace, while the king was seated on his royal throne in the audience chamber, facing the palace doorway. When he saw King Esther standing in the courtyard, she won his favor, and he extended toward her the golden scepter he held. She came up to him. He touched the top of the scepter. On the third day, ending her prayer, she took off her prayer garment and arrayed herself in her splendid attire. In making her appearance after invoking the all-seeing God and Savior, she took with her two maids. On the one she leaned gently for support, while the other followed her, bearing her trains. She glowed with perfect beauty, and her face was joyous as it was lovely, though her heart was pounding with fears. She passed through all the portals till she stood before the king, who was seated on his royal throne, clothed in a full robe of the state and covered with gold and precious stones, so that he inspired great awe. As he looked up in extreme anger, his feature fiery and majestic, the queen staggered, turned pale, and fainted, collapsing against the maid in front of her. But God changed the king's anger to the gentleness. In great anxiety, he sprang from his throne, held her in his arms until she recovered, and comforted her with reassuring words. "What is it, Esther?" he said to her. "I am your brother. Take courage. You shall not die. This order of the hour applies only to our subject. Come near." Raising the golden scepter, he touched her neck with it, embraced her, and said, "Speak to me." She replied, "I saw you, my lord, as an angel of the God, and my heart was shaken by fear of your majesty. For you are awesome, my lord, though your countenance is full of mercy." As she said this, she fainted. The king was shaken, and all his attendants tried to revive her. Then the king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even if it is half of my kingdom, it shall be granted you." Esther replied, "If it please your majesty, come today with Haman to a banquet I have prepared." The king ordered, "Have Haman make haste to fulfill the wish of the Esther." First, the banquet of the Esther. So the king went with Haman to the banquet Esther had prepared. During the drinking of the wine, the king said to Esther, "Whatever you ask for shall be granted, and whatever request you make shall be honored, even if it is for half of my kingdoms." Esther replied, "This is my petition and request. If I have found favor with the king, and if it please your majesty to grant my petition and honor my request, let the king come with Haman tomorrow to a banquet I'll prepare, and tomorrow I'll do as the king asks." Haman plotted against Mordecai. That day Haman left happy and in good spirit, but when he saw that Mordecai at the royal gate did not rise, and showed no fear to him, he was filled with anger toward him. Haman restrained himself, however, and went home, where he summoned his friend and his wife Jealousy. He recounted the greatness of his riches, the large number of his sons, and how the king had promoted him and placed him above the official and the royal servants. Moreover, Haman added, "Queen Esther invited no one but me to come with the king to the banquet she prepared. Again, tomorrow I am to be her guest with the king." Yet none of this satisfied me as long as I continued to see the Jews Mordecai sitting at the royal gate. His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, "Have a stake set up 50 cubits in the height, and in the morning ask the king to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go to the banquet with the king in good spirit." This suggestion pleased Haman, and he had the stake erected. Esther chapter 6, Mordecai reward from the king. That night the king, unable to sleep, asked that the chronicle of the notable events be brought in while this was being read to him. The passage occurred in which Mordecai reported Bigtan and Taras, two of the royal eunuchs who guarded the entrance, for seeking to assassinate King Ahasuerus. The king asked what was done to honor and exalt Mordecai for this. The king's attendant replied, "Nothing was done for him." "Who's in the court?" the king asked. Now Haman had entered the outer court of the king's palace to suggest to king that Mordecai should be impaled on the stake he had raised for him. The king's attendant answered him, "Haman is waiting in the court." The king said, "Let him come in." When Haman entered, the king said to him, "What should be done for the man whom the king wished to reward?" Now Haman thought to himself, "Whom would the king wish to honor more than me?" So he replied to the king, "For the man whom the king wished to honor. There should be brought the royal robe the king wore, and the horse the king rode with the royal crest placed on its head. The robe and the horse should be given to the one of the noblest of the king officials, who must clothe the man the king wishes to the reward. Have him ride on the horse in the public square of the city and cry out before him. This is what is done for the man whom the king wishes to honor." Then the king said to Haman, "Hurry, take the robe and the horse as you have proposed, and do this for the Jew Mordecai, who is sitting at the royal gate. Do not omit anything you proposed." So Haman took the robe and the horses, clothed Mordecai, had him ride in the public square of the city, and cried out before him, "This is what is done for the man whom the king wished to honor." Mordecai then returned to the royal gate, while Haman hurried home grieving with his head covered. When he told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him, his advisor and his wife Zeresh said to him, "If Mordecai, before who are beginning to fall, is of Jewish ancestry, you will not prevail against him, but will surely be defeated by him." Esther's second banquet. While they were speaking with him, the king's eunuch arrived and hurried Haman out to the banquet Esther had prepared. Esther chapter 7. So the king of the Haman went to the banquet with the king Esther. Again on the second day, as they were drinking wine, the king said to Esther, "Whatever you ask, King Esther, shall be granted to you. Whatever request you make, even for half the kingdom, shall be honored." Queen Esther replied, "If I have found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases your majesty, I ask that my life be spared, and I beg that you spare the lives of my peoples. For you have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. For if we were only to be sold into slavery, I would remain silent, for then our distress would not have been worth troubling the king." King Ahasuerus said to King Esther, "Who and where is the man who has dared to do this?" Esther replied, "The enemy oppressing us is the wicked Haman." At this, Haman was seized with the dread of the king and the queens. The king left the banquet in anger and went into the garden of the palace, but Haman stayed to beg Queen Esther for his life, since he saw that the king had decided on his doom. When the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman had thrown himself on the couch on which Esther was reclining, and the king exclaimed, We also violate the queen while she is with me in my own house. Scarcely had the king spoken when the face of Haman was covered over. Punishment of Haman. Harbona, one of the eunuchs who attended the king, said, "At the house of the Haman stand a stake of 50 cubits high. Haman made it for Mordecai, who gave the report that benefited the king." The king answered, "Impale him on it." So they impaled Haman on the stake he had set up for Mordecai, and the anger of the king abated. Esther chapter 8. That day, King Ahasuerus gave the house of the Haman, enemy of the Jews, to Queen Esther, and Mordecai was admitted to the king's presence, for Esther had revealed his relationship to her. The king removed his signet ring that he had taken away from Haman and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther put Mordecai in charge of the house of the Haman. The second royal decrees. Esther again spoke to the king. She fell at his feet and tearfully implored him to revoke the harm done by Haman the Agagite, and the plan he had devised against the Jews. The king stretched forth the golden scepter to Esther, so she arose and standing before him, said, "If he seems good to king, and if I have found favor with him, if the king seems right to the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let a document be issued to the revoked letters that schemer Haman, son of the Hammedatha, the Agagite, wrote for the destruction of the Jews in all the royal provinces. For how can I witness the evil that is to befall my people, and how can I behold the destruction of my kindreds?" King Ahasuerus then said to Queen Esther and to Jew Mordecai, "Now that I have given Esther the house of the Haman, and they have impaled him on the stake because he was going to attack the Jews, you in turn may write in the king's name what you see fit concerning the Jews, and seal the letter with the royal signet rings. For a decree written in the name of the king and sealed with the royal signet ring cannot be revoked." At that time, on the 23rd day of the third month, Sivan, the royal scribe, was summoned, exactly as Mordecai dictated. They wrote to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and officials of the 127 provinces from the India to Ethiopia. To each province its own script, and to each people in its own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. These are letters which he wrote in the name of the king Ahasuerus and sealed with the royal signet ring. He sent by mounted couriers riding through a bread royal steeds. In this letter, the king authorized the Jews in each and every city to gather and defend their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate every armed group of any nation or province that might attack them, along with their wives and children, and to seize their goods as spoil. On a single day throughout the province of the king Ahasuerus, the 13th day of the 12th month Adar. The following is a copy of the letter the great king Ahasuerus to the governor of the provinces in the 127 satrapies from the India to Ethiopia, and to those who are loyal to our government, the greetings. Many have become more ambitious the more they were showered with honors through the bountiful generosity of their patrons. Not only do they seek to do harm to our subject, but incapable of dealing with such greatness, they even begin plotting against their own benefactors. Not only do they drive out the gratitude from among humankind, but with the Aaron, the boastful fullest of those to whom goodness has no meaning. They suppose they will escape the stern judgment of the all-seeing good. Often, too, the fair speech of the friend entrusted with the administration of the affairs has induced the many placed in authority to become accomplices in the shedding of the innocent blood, and has involved them in irreparable calamities. By deceiving with the malicious slander the sincere goodwill of the rulers. This can be verified in ancient stories that have been handed down to us, but more fully when you consider the wicked deeds perpetrated in your midst by the pestilential influence of those undeserving of authority. We must provide for the future so as to render the kingdom undisturbed and peaceful for all peoples. Taking advantage of the changing condition and always a deciding matter to coming to our attention with the equitable treatment. For instance, Haman, some of the Hammedatha of the Macedonians, certainly not of the Persian blood, and very different from us in generosity, was hospitably received by us. He benefited so much from goodwill we have toward all peoples that he was proclaimed our Father, before whom everyone was to bow down. And he attained a position second only to the royal thrones. But unable to control his arrogance, he strove to deprive us of kingdom of lives. And by weaving intricate web of the deceit, he demanded the destruction of the Mordecai, our savior or constant benefactor, and of the Esther, our blameless royal consort, together with their whole nation. For by such measure he hoped to catch us defenseless and to transfer the rule of the Persians to the Macedonians. But we find that the Jews who were doomed to the extinction by these acrimers are not evildoers, but rather are governed by very just laws. And I, the children of the Most High, the living God of the Majesty, who has maintained the kingdom, is a flourishing condition for us and for our forebears. You will do well then to ignore the letter sent by Haman, son of the Hammedatha. For he who composed it has been impaled together with his entire household before the gate of the Susa. Thus swiftly has God, who governed or brought just punishment upon him. You shall exhibit a copy of this letter publicly in every place to certify that the Jews may follow their own laws, and that you may help them on the day set for their ruins, the 13th day of the 12th month, order to defend themselves against those who attack them. For God, the ruler of all, has turned that day from one of the destruction of the chosen people into one of joy for them. Therefore, you too must celebrate this memorable day among your designated feast with all rejoicing. Both now and in the future, it may be a celebration of the deliverance for us and the prophesying of the goodwill, but for those who plot against us, a reminder of the destruction. Every city and province, without the exception, that does not observe this decree shall be ruthlessly destroyed with fire and sword, so that it will be left not merely untrodden by peoples, but even shunned by wild beasts and birds of the forever. A copy of the letter to be promulgated as law in each and every province was published among all the peoples, so that the Jews might be prepared on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. couriers mounted on royal steeds sped forth in haste at the king's order, and the decree was promulgated in the royal precinct of Susa. Mordecai left the king presence clothed in the royal robe of the violet and the white cotton, with a large crown of the gold and the mantle of the fine crimson linen. The city of the Susa shouted with joy. And for the Jews there was splendor and gladness, joy and triumphs. In each and every province and in each and every city, wherever the king's order arrived, there was merriment and joy, banqueting and feasting for the Jews, and many of the people of the land identified themselves as Jews, for fear of the Jews fell upon them. Esther chapter 9, the massacre reversed. When the day arrived on which the order decreed by the king was to carry out, the 13th day of the 12th month Adar, on which the enemy of the Jews had expected to overpower them, the situation was reversed. The Jews overpowered those who hate them. The Jews mustered in their cities throughout the province of the king Ahasuerus to attack those who sought to do them harm. And no one could withstand them, for fear of them fell upon all the peoples. Moreover, all the officials of the province, the satraps, governors, and the royal procurators supported the Jews out of fear of the Mordecai. For Mordecai was powerful in the royal palace. In the report was spreading through all the province that he was continually growing in power. The Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them. They did to those who hated them as they pleased. In the royal precinct of the Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 people. They also killed Pashadatha, Dalphon, Aspata, Poretta, Adalias, Aridatas, Pamashuta, Arisai, Aridai, and Vaizata, the 10th son of the Haman, son of the Hammedatha, the foe of the Jews. However, they did not engage in plunderings. On the same day, when the number of those killed in the royal precinct of the Susa was reported to the king, he said to the king Esther, in the royal precinct of the Susa, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 people, as well as the 10 sons of the Haman. What must they have done in the other royal provinces? You shall again be granted whatever you ask, and whatever you request shall be honored. So Esther said, if it please your majesty, let the Jews in Susa be permitted again tomorrow to act according to today's decrees, and let the 10 sons of the Haman be impaled on stake. The king then gave the order that this be done, and the decree was published in the Susa, so the 10 sons of the Haman were impaled. And the Jews in Susa mustered again on the 14th of the month of the Adar and killed 300 people in Susa. However, they did not engage in plunderings. The other Jews who dwelt in the royal province also mustered and defended themselves and obtained the rest from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of those who hate them, but they did not engage in plunder. This happened on the 13th day of the month of the Adar, the feast of the Purims. On the 14th of the month they rested and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. The Jews in Susa, however, mustered on the 13th and the 14th of the month, but on the 15th they rested and made it a day of the joyful banquetings. That is why the rural Jews who dwell in the villages celebrate the 14th of the month of the Adar as a day of the joyful banquetings, a holiday on which they send food to one another. Mordecai recorded this event and sent a letter to all the Jews, both near and far, in the old province of the king Ahasuerus. He ordered them to celebrate every year both the 14th and the 15th of the month of the Adar, as the day on which the Jews obtained the rest from their enemy, and as the month which was the turn for them from sorrow into joy, from mourning into celebration. They were to observe these days with joyful banqueting, sending food to one another and gifts to the poor. The Jews adopted as a custom what they had begun doing and what Mordecai had written to them. A summary of the story. Haman, son of the Hammedatha the Agagite, the foe of all Jews, had planned to destroy them and had cast a ball, or a lot, for the time of their defeat and destruction. Yet when the plot became known to the king ordered in writing that the wicked plan Haman had devised against the Jews should instead be turned against Haman, and that he and his son should be impaled on stakes. And so this day have been named Purim at the war post, just because of all that was contained in this letter, and because of what they had witnessed and experienced in this event. The Jews established and adopted as a custom for themselves, their descendants, and all who should join them, the perpetual obligation of celebrating these 2 days every year in the manner prescribed by these letters, and at the time appointed. These days were to be commemorated and kept in every generation by every clan, in every province, in every city. This day of the Purim were never to be neglected among the Jews, nor forgotten by their descendants. Esther and Mordecai acted in concert. Queen Esther, daughter of the Abihail, and Mordecai the Jews wrote to confirm with the full authority this second letter about Purim. And Mordecai sent a document concerning peace and security to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of the Ahasuerus kingdom. Thus were established for their appointed time this day of the Purim, which Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had designated for the Jews, just as they had previously enjoined upon themselves and upon their descendants the duty of the fasting and the supplication. The command of the Esther confirmed this prescription for Purim and was recorded in the book. Esther chapter 10, the rise of the Mordecai completed. King Ahasuerus levied a tax on the land and on the island of the sea. All the act of the power and the valor, as well as the detailed account of the greatness of the Mordecai, whom the king promoted, are recorded in the Chronicles of the Kings of the Media and Persia. The Jew Mordecai was next in rank to King Ahasuerus in high standing among the Jews, popular with many of his kindred, seeking the good of his people and speaking out on behalf of the welfare of all its descendants. Mordecai's dream fulfilled. Then the Mordecai said, "This is the work of the God. I recall dream I have about these very things, and not a single detail has been left unfulfilled." The tiny spring that grew into a river, and there was a light and the sun and many waters. The river is Esther, whom the king married and made queens. The two dragons are myself and Haman. The nations are those assembled to destroy the name of the Jews. But my people is Israel, who cried to God and was saved. The Lord saved his people and delivered to us from all these evils. God worked signs and great wonders such as have not occurred among the nations. For this purpose he ordained to allot one for the people of God, the second for all the other nations. These two lots were fulfilled in the hour of the time and the day of the judgment before God and among all the nations. God remembered his people and rendered justice to his inheritance. Gathering together with joy and happiness before God, they shall celebrate this day on the 14th and the 15th of the month, Adar, throughout all the future generation of his people Israel. Colophon. In the first year of the reign of the Ptolemy and Cleopatra, Dosithetus, who said he was a priest and a Levite, and his son Ptolemy brought the present relic of Purim, saying that it was genuine and that Lysimachus, son of the Ptolemy of the community of the Jerusalem, had translated it.